Hi students. Now we will move on to the topic called proportions. The next part of the topic chapter is proportions. If you have done ratios, then proportions is the next step and it's quite simple as well. So don't worry. Now, what do you mean by the term proportion? Proportion means equality between ratios. Proportion means equality between ratios. Let me take an example. Now, if A is to B is equal to C is to D. If A is to B, A ratio B is equal to C is to D, C ratio D, we call that as a proportion. So what does this imply? A by B. A is to B is also called A by B. Same way C by D. So A by B is equal to C by D. This is called a proportion. This is called a proportion. So I said A is to B is equal to C is to D. Now here if you observe, A and D are at the extreme ends and B and C are in the middle of this proportion. So A and D, which are at the extreme, are called extremes, and B and C, which are in the middle, are called means. So if in a proportion you have A is to B and C is to D, A and D are the extreme end ones are extremes and the ones in the middle are called as means. So we said A is to B is equal to C is to D. So A by B equals C by D. This is the way we express the ratios. So this implies that A into D is equal to B into C. AD is equal to BC. You know that A and D are the extremes and B and C are the means. So the product of extremes is equal to product of means. This is a important point here. Product of extremes is equal to the product of the means. Now let me show you one important point here before we start some problems. Okay, so we know that A is to B is equal to C is to D. This is an example of a proportion. Here, A is called the first proportion. Okay, B is called the second proportion. C is called the third proportion. And D is called the fourth proportion. Okay, they are asking you to identify based on the first, second, third, and fourth. So this concept is basically the first one is the first proportion, second is the second proportion, third and fourth are third and fourth proportions respectively. They will ask you to solve questions based on this concept. So students, let me do a quick recap of this. A is to B and C is to D. This is the first proportion. This is the second proportion. This is the third proportion. And this is the fourth proportion. Okay, so now let me take an example, a question here. Find the third proportion of 8, 6, and 12. Find the third proportion of 8, 6 and 12. Since they have mentioned that you need to find the third proportion, that means third proportion is not given. Okay, so let me start with the answer here. Now 8, 6, third proportion and 12. This is the first proportion, this is the second proportion, this is the third proportion, and this is the fourth proportion. Okay, so this is the first part. Also, you know that A by B is equal to C by D as per this proportion, ratio and proportion rule. So here we know that the first proportion by second proportion equal to third proportion by fourth proportion. Okay, we know that A by B is equal to C by D. A is 8, B is 6. So 8 by 6. C is X. We don't know what is the third proportion. So that is X. And D is 12. Alright. So D is 12. Six into X is equal to 8 into 12. 6X is equal to 96. X is equal to 96 by 6. X is equal to 16. So the third proportion is equal to 16. Let's take one more question. Find the fourth proportion of 5, 10 and 12. Okay, find the fourth proportion of 5, 10 and 12. Because they've given you the question as find the fourth proportion, you know that 5 is the first proportion, 10 is the second and 12 is the third proportion. Let's say the fourth is X. Okay, we don't know what is X. Okay, so let's start by placing the relationship here. You know that A by B is equal to C by D. So in this case, 5 by 10 is equal to 12 by X. 5 into X is equal to 10 into 12. 5X is equal to 120. X is equal to 120 by 5. Okay. X is equal to 24. This is the answer. Till now, I was teaching you examples of proportions with 4 numbers. Okay, A is to B, A ratio B, proportion C ratio D. Okay, there are 4 numbers in this. This is the first proportion, second proportion, third, and the fourth one. Now let us take an example of proportion with 3 numbers and the relationships based on that. Okay, so in this particular example, let me say A ratio B proportion B ratio C. B is the same. Alright, B is the same. So this means A by B equals B by C. From this we get B into B is equal to A into C. We get B square is equal to AC. We also get B is equal to square root of AC. Do you understand? B square is equal to AC. B is equal to square root of AC. Okay, so here this particular number, this value B, we call it the mean proportion. Mean proportion. Okay. Let's take the next concept. Okay, let's go to the next point here. From this, we will go to the next point. In our example, we say A ratio B proportion B ratio C. Okay, here A is the first proportion, B is the second proportion, and C is the third proportion. There is no fourth proportion here. And we know that the first proportion by the second proportion is equal to the second proportion by the third proportion. First proportion by second proportion is equal to the second proportion by the third proportion. Okay, so make a note of all this. Let me take you through some examples. Now, let me take one problem. Find the third proportion. Okay, the first part of the question is find the third proportion from 1 and 2. The second part of the question is find the third proportion for 1, 2 and 3. Now look at the first one. Find the third proportion for 1, 2 and 3. And the second one is find the third proportion for 1, 2 and 3. Second part is 1, 2 and 3. They're asking you to find the third proportion. So this is a classic case of A is to B proportion C is to D. And the first part A is find the third proportion for 1 and 2. This has only two numbers given. That means there is only one more number. Therefore, this is a case of A ratio B proportion B ratio C. Okay, this is the simultaneous kind of two questions which will help you understand the correct concepts properly. Okay, so let's solve the question. First question. Given numbers are 1 and 2. This is the first proportion and this is 2 is the second proportion. Therefore, you know that A by B is equal to B by C. 1 by 2 is equal to 2 by C. They're asking you to find the third proportion. C is equal to 4. C is equal to 4. The second part of this question, find the third proportion for 1, 2 and 3. Numbers given are 1, 2 and 3. 1 is the first proportion, 2 is the second proportion, and 3 is the fourth proportion. Okay, 3 is the fourth proportion. Now let us form the equation here. A by B is equal to C by D. 1 by 2 is equal to C by 3. 2 into C is equal to 3 into 1. 2C is equal to 3. C is equal to 3 by 2. Okay, let me take you through some important properties of proportion. So I've given you a very brief introduction and now we'll move on to the properties. Okay, the characteristics of proportions. Okay, so one by one let us deal with all the properties of proportions. Okay, the first and foremost property of proportion is invertendo. Invertendo. Okay, so what do you mean by invertendo? Okay, invertendo means if I have a proportion A by B is equal to C by D, okay, then I can take the inverse of the two ratios. B by A is equal to D by C. The two inverse of the ratios will also be equal. Okay, so let me show you one example. If I have a ratio 1 is to 2 is proportional to 2 is to 4. Okay, so then I know that 1 by 2 is equal to 2 by 4. With the help of invertendo, I can also conclude that 2 by 1 is equal to 4 by 2. Okay, this is the rule of invertendo. If you take the inverse, that should also be equal in case of a proportion. Okay, next example, next property, alternando. Alternando. Okay, what do you mean by alternando? Okay, if I have a proportion A by B is equal to C by D, I can alternate the terms. How can I alternate the terms? I can conclude that if A by B is equal to C by D, A by C is also equal to B by D. This is what is called as alternando. Let me take an example. If 2 is to 3 proportional to 4 is to 6. Okay, if 2 is to 3 proportional to 4 is to 6, then we know that 2 by 3 is equal to 4 by 6. We can conclude that with the help of alternando, 2 by 4 is also equal to 3 by 6. If you solve it, you'll see that it is correct. This is what is called alternando. Okay, now the third property, componendo. What do you call it? Componendo. Okay, what do you mean by componendo? If there are two ratios, A by B is equal to C by D, okay, a proportion, then we can also say that A plus B by B is equal to C plus D by D. This is what is called as componendo. Okay, let me show you an example. If 2 is to 3 proportional to 4 is to 6, then 2 by 3 is equal to 4 by 6. This implies that 2 plus 3 by 3 is equal to 4 plus 6 by 6. 5 by 3 is equal to 10 by 6. This is what is known as componendo. This is what is componendo. Let's move on to the fifth one, fifth property. Componendo and dividendo. Componendo and dividendo. Okay, what do you mean by that property? If A by B is equal to C by D, then A plus B by A minus B is equal to C plus D by C minus D. Okay, let me take you through one example. If 3 is to 2 is equal to 6 is to 4, then 3 by 2 is equal to 6 by 4. 3 plus 2 by 3 minus 2 is equal to 6 plus 4 by 6 minus 4. 5 by 1 is equal to 10 by 2. This is componendo and dividendo. Okay, the next property is addendo. Okay, addendo. What do you mean by the property addendo? Okay, let me tell you. See, if A by B is equal to C by D is equal to E by F is equal to a constant K. Okay, then A plus C plus E by B plus D plus F is also equal to the constant K. Okay, let me take you through an example. If 2 ratio 3 is equal to 4 ratio 6 is equal to 6 ratio 9, then according to, okay, 2 by 3 is equal to 4 by 6 is equal to 6 by 9. Then according to addendo, 2 plus 4 plus 6 by 3 plus 6 plus 9 is equal to 6 plus 6 by 9 plus 9 is equal to 12 plus 18 is equal to 2 by 3. Find first proportion from 3, 4 and 7. One more question. Parallelly, let's do both. Find first proportion from 5 and 7. Okay, so they're asking you to find out the first proportion in both cases. In the first case, they have given you how many terms? 3 terms. When they're giving you 3 terms, they ask you to find the fourth one. That means it is a case of 4 terms. It's A is to B proportion, C is to D. So when there are 3, you have to take out 4. When there are 2, you have to take out 3. So when there are 3, you have to take out A is to B proportion, C is to D. Okay, and in this case, find the first proportion. We don't know what is the first proportion. Let us say it is A only. Okay, and B is given to be 3. So that is the second one. Third is 4. Fourth is 7. We don't know what is A. So let us say A by B is equal to C by D. This is the formula. In this case, it is A by 3 is equal to 4 by 7. 7A is equal to 12. A is equal to 12 by 7. Let's do the second question here. When they are giving you two terms, you have to you have to pull out one more term. So that means it is three items, three terms are there. So when there are two, you have to take out three. So this is a case of A is to B proportion, B is to C. So A, you're asked to find out A. We don't know what is A. 5 is the second one, and the same 5 is the third one also, and 7 is the fourth term. So it is A by B is equal to B by C. A by 5 is equal to 5 by 7. 7A is equal to 25. A is equal to 25 by 7. Find the mean proportion of 25 and 16. Find the mean proportion of 25 and 16. Mean proportion formula is equal to square root of AC. Mean proportion is nothing but B. Okay, we know that B square is equal to AC, therefore B is equal to square root of AC. We've already done this. So B is the mean proportion, that is equal to square root of 25 into 16, which is equal to 5 square into 4 square, which is equal to 5 into 4, which is equal to 20. Now this question is a really important example. Please be thorough. Please copy it down carefully. Very important question. Let us go to the ICAI's material on proportion. Okay, let's start. An equality of two ratios is called a proportion. Proportion means equality of two ratios. Four quantities A, B, C, and D are said to be in proportion if A if A is to B proportion C is to D. That is A by B is equal to C by D. That is AD is equal to BC. And the quantities A, B, C, and D are called the terms of the proportion. A is called the first term, B is called the second term, C is called the third term, and D is called the fourth term, respectively. And A and D are called the extremes. B and C are called the means or the middle term. If A is to B, proportion C is to D, then D is called the fourth proportional. And there is one more thing here. AD is equal to BC. This is also called product of extremes is equal to product of means. This is the cross product rule. There is one more type of proportion which is A, B and C based. So in this case, A is to B proportion, B is to C. A is the first proportional, B is the mean proportional, and C is the third proportional. Now let's move on. Let's move on to the next concept. A quick recap for you. When three or more numbers are so related that the ratio of the first to the second, the ratio of second to the third, third to the fourth, etc. are all equal, the numbers are said to be in continued proportion. So what do you mean by the term continued proportion is when we have x by y is equal to y by z is equal to z by w. This is called as continued proportion. You can also go on is equal to w by p is equal to p by q. This is called as continued proportion. One more important crucial point here is in case of a ratio, both quantities must be of the same kind. However, in the case of a proportion, the first two quantities and the must be of the same kind and the last two quantities must be of the same kind. Okay, all four need not be of the same type. All four need not be of the same type. Next, we'll move on to simple examples. One by one, we'll move on to those examples, solve them with the solution given and slowly do it. Let's do a small recap of the properties of proportions. First one is cross multiplication. If A is to B proportion C is to D, then AD is equal to BC. proof is A by B is equal to C by D. Therefore, AD is equal to BC. This is cross multiplication based. The second is invertendo. If A by B is equal to C by D, then B by A is equal to D by C. Alternando. If A by B is equal to C by D, then A by C is equal to B by D. The next one is componendo. If A by B is equal to C by D, then A plus B by B is equal to C plus D by D. Then we have dividendo. If A by B is equal to C by D, then A minus B by B is equal to C minus D by D. Then the last one is componendo and dividendo. If A by B is equal to C by D, then A plus B by A minus B is equal to C plus B by C minus D. C plus D by C minus D. Then one more is addendo. Addendo. Addendo says that if A is to B, proportion C is to D, proportion E is to F, and all these are equal to say a K, then A by B is equal to C by D is equal to E by F is equal to say K, then A plus C plus E plus so on and so forth by B plus D plus F plus so on and so forth is also equal to K. Let me teach you quickly about this rule. Rule of allegation. Very important rule. Rule of allegation. Let me teach you about the rule of allegation. Now, why is it required to be taught? Why do we need to understand the rule of allegation? Now, when do you need to apply this rule? I will teach you one by one. Just read the definition and then you'll get to know when you need to apply it. Okay, don't omit please learn this properly. Rule of allegation means this rule enables us to find out the ratio at which two or more quantity must be mixed in order to get a mixture which can be sold at a desired price. So rule of allegation enables us to find out the ratio at which two or more quantity must be mixed in order to get a mixture which can be sold at the desired price. So this type of question, this type of rule, the application of this rule is when. When is it to be applied? We have to apply when there is a mixture. Okay, there is a mixture of two or more types of some product. For example, tea. Okay, there are two types of tea. T1, TEAT, T1 and T2. There are two types of tea for which I know the cost price. I know the cost price of these two types of tea and I mix them in a certain proportion. In a certain proportion means some quantities I need to add of each type of tea in order to get a mixture which I can sell at a specified selling price. So with the help of the cost price of both the types of tea and the selling price of the final product of tea, I have to find out the quantity to be mixed for T1 and T2. This is the type of question for which rule of allegation is to be applied. Those questions for which we have a mixture, we have to apply the rule of allegation. Mixture, whenever it is used. Okay, so what is the method to solve? Method to solve in the as per the rule of allegation. I'm going to show you the easy method, the shortcut to solve the rule of allegation in the rule of allegation to solve the mixture kind of problems. Okay, in most of these mixture kind of problems, you will be getting a question. There are two types of rice. Okay, rice 1 and rice 2. Okay, the shopkeeper mixes both to get a third type of rice. Okay, this is the rice 3. Say for example, rice 3. They will give you at what price the selling price will be given in the problem. They will also give you the cost price of rice 1 and the cost price of rice 2. And they will ask you to calculate the quantity of rice 1 and the quantity of rice 2 that will be required to make this final product. I will repeat again. There will be a question of a mixture. Okay, there will be a question where there will be a mixture of two or more types of the same item. It could be rice, it could be coffee, it could be tea. So if you take anything, for example, rice. Okay, rice 1 and rice 2. For example, there are two types of basmati A and Basmati B. You will be given the cost price of Basmati A and the cost price of Basmati B. And there is a third product which is made by mixing these two. When you mix these two, how much should you sell that final product. So this is final product, rice B or basmati rice B is the final product, and the selling price of that will be shared with you in the question. Cost price of both the raw materials will be given. Selling price of final item will be given. You will be asked to find out the quantity that is required of rice 1 and the quantity required of rice 2 to manufacture the final product, the mixture. Using these three information, these three details, you need to calculate the quantities. Okay. So coming to the trick and the shortcut to solve this rule of alligation. I told you that cost price of the rice, first rice and second rice will be given. Obviously, it will be different in most cases, right? So when it is different, you have to see which is the cheaper one. Okay, so if whatever is given, take the first here in this particular point, you take as cost of the cheaper item per unit. You take that value here. We will denote that as C, cost of the cheaper item per unit. And here you take the cost of the dearer item per unit. The cost of the dearer item per unit. This you call it D. I told you that cost price will be given for both. So the one which is the cheaper one you put on the left side, denoted by C, and the costlier one you put on the right side, because both are starting with C. I've given the term as dearer. So it is D. Dearer means most precious. So it is precious to us because it is costly. Okay, so this is C and D. You put those values there. And then here, this is the final product, final product's cost price. Let us say it is M, final product's cost price. That is the cost of this product which is to be sold. That is the M value. That's the cost price. And then here you will have to say quantity of the cheaper item. That would be D minus M. And here quantity of dearer item, that is C minus M. Okay, quantity of cheaper item, quantity of dearer item. Now let's look at an exam question. On mixtures. Okay, so let me write down the question here. A dealer mixes tea costing rupees 6.92 per kg with tea costing rupees 7.77 per kg. He sells the mixture at rupees 8.80 per kg and earns a profit of 17.5% on sale price. They are asking me to find out in what proportion does he mix them. That means what is the quantity of the first and the second that he uses. Now, let me take the format here. Now the dealer mixes two types of tea. On the left side on the top, I need to write down the cheaper cost of the cheaper variety of the tea. Okay, so let me write down that value first. 6.92 is my cheaper one, and the costly one, the dearer one, is 7.77. Okay, and the next box here has to have the cost of the finished product, that is called M. I denote it by M. I am told that he sells the mixture at 8.80 per kg. That is the selling price of his final good. Now, if my selling price is 100, my profit is 17.5%. Therefore, my cost is 82.5%. Therefore, if my selling price is 8.8, my cost per kg is 8.80 into 82.5 by 100. That gives me 7.26 rupees per kg. Now that value is what I need to write down in the middle here. Okay, I need to write down that value 7.26 here. Now the final leg of my calculation is in the left hand side box in the last row, I have to write D minus M. D is the dearer cost, 7.77 minus M is what we found out now. 7.77 minus 7.26, it is 0.51. And here I need to write C minus M. C is 6.92, cheaper one, minus 7.26, dearer one, sorry, the cost of the raw material, final product, which is 0.34. This is quantity 1 and this is quantity 2. So the proportion is 0.51 is to 0.34. Okay, the proportion required is, this is equal to, you can also write this as 51 is to 34, which can be further simplified into 3 is to 2. Now there are a few important points which I would like to convey to you. Important points for exam. Okay, the first important point is, if they give you a ratio, okay, say 1 is to 8, 1 is to 6, 1 is to 4. Okay, in order to simplify this ratio, you have to multiply each of the ratio by the LCM. Multiplied by the LCM, you'll instantly get the answer. Okay, let's do one example. Side by side, I'll also revise LCM for you. So if you want to find out the LCM of 8, 6 and 4, you have to first follow this procedure. Take out 2, okay, the common factor here. 2 4s are 8, 2 3s are 6, 2 2s are 4. Again 4 and 2 will get divided by 2. 2 2s are 4, this will remain. 2 1s are 2. Again you take 2, 2 1s are 2, this will remain, this will remain. Then you have 3, 3, ignore this, 1s, ignore it. Okay, and then you have 1 here. That's it. So now what is my LCM? LCM is 2 into 2 into 2 into 3 into 1. 24. So now my LCM is 24. I need to multiply 1 by 8 into 24, 1 by 6 into 24, 1 by 4 into 24. I will instantly get 3 is to 4 is to 6. This is a simplified ratio. This is a simple step to solve it without going to 2-3 steps. Okay, now second point here I want to convey is sometimes they might ask you to find out, or they might use this term continuous ratio, continuous proportion. Continuous proportion. They might use the term continuous proportion. So what do you mean by continuous proportion? Continuous proportion means A is to B, proportion B is to C. So they might use the term as continuous proportion, and you need to understand that it refers to this type of proportion. There is one more term which they might use in the exam, that is called cross product ratio. What do you mean by cross product ratio? They might ask you to find the cross product ratio and choose the option. Now, what happens is if you don't know this term, then you might end up losing marks for something which you actually know. Okay, so I'm going to show you this so that you are aware of it in the exam also. So, cross product ratio means product of extremes is equal to product of means. This is the cross product ratio. So please be well versed with all these three important points. We'll go ahead with the next few topics.